Hello, welcome back to Strasbourg for our EU Commission clash, the candidates debate on France 24. We are with two politicians who would very much like to take over from Jean-Claude Juncker. They are Manfred and Frans Timmermans. Thanks both for still being with us. If you missed part one of the show, we talked about Brexit, immigration and more. You can watch that back on our website, france24.com. Right now, though, let's get going with part two of the show. I'd like to start by talking about daily life in the EU. We touched on some elements in our part one. Our reporter Clovis Casali has been to one of the most deprived parts of mainland France in the company of two men who've joined up with the Gilets jaunes protests. We can hear from them.
The Creuse is one of the most deserted and poor areas in France. When the Yellow Vest rallies first began, retired farmer Gérard joined the movement with his nephew Olivier, who's been struggling to make ends meet since he switched to organic farming.
Did you get the subsidies for going organic?
Still nothing.
Okay, so nothing for the past 3 years, right?
Not a single centime.
The French state has failed to pay Olivier his subsidies, citing software problems. He can't even pay himself his usual salary of €300 a month. Gérard gets a state pension of €652 a month and hopes the Yellow Vests will be heard without standing in the European elections.
The Yellow Vests are here to denounce what politicians and unions failed to achieve over the last 40 years. We're not here to replace them, but to tell governments the road to take.
These farmers have seen their quality of life worsen over the years.
I'm really passionate about what I do, otherwise I would have stopped a long time ago. Or I would have put a bullet in my head. I'm not joking, it makes me shiver. It's hard, but I'm going to try to pull through.
Olivier believes in the European project, but he wants competition to be fair across the continent. Many in the Creuse feel neglected and hope Paris will acknowledge the importance of rural France.
Well, we came to you first in part one, Frans Timmermans, so I'll come to you first this time around, Manfred. We heard there in our report, the farmers saying that the Gilets jaunes are there to denounce what politicians have failed to achieve over the last 40 years. Those huge protests, not just in France, but in other parts of Europe as well. Is this a failure by mainstream parties that have been overseeing Europe, like yours?
Well, I fully understand that people are focusing on their personal questions, concerns, fears for the future and demands. But generally speaking, the European Union was in the last years, let me say, machinery which created equal living conditions, especially in regions like Hungary, like Czech Republic, like where we had positive developments in a lot of rural areas. So that's why the approach of how Europe can assist rural areas, and especially the farmers, is a positive tool, and we have the elements to do so. And I want to strengthen them. So especially for the poorest region in today's Europe, we have to practice more solidarity. And if member states cannot deliver, that the money is really well spent in a way that this is really helping the poorest region, then Europe has to strengthen, let me say, the approach. Then Europe has to take over the question, what are we doing concretely in the region? But the solidarity mechanism of Europe with regional funds and with agriculture funds, the two big dossiers in our budget of the European Union, is a good approach and should help also the poorest regions.
A problem, though, perhaps, that we hear from many Gilets jaunes is that many people feel that lots of money has been spent on bailing out banks. That money's lost. I believe 213 billion euros has gone on bailouts, 1.5 trillion on bank rescues since 2008. People saying, why are you looking after the banks? Not me. Don't I count?
I fully understand this. And the banks, first of all, are part of me because everybody has a bank account. So to rescue and stabilize our financial infrastructure in the European Union is part of stabilizing the economy in Europe. That was needed to do so. But on the other hand, we have to look for a fair treatment. And that's why I think then the big financial institutes must also contribute to finance the poor regions with, for example, a financial transaction taxation for the European Union to really guarantee that the financial sector is contributing to our state in a positive way.
Frans Timmermans, I know that you spoke in part one about an EU-wide minimum wage as one idea.
I think the reality for many Europeans is very bleak. You know, we still have 15% of our young people unemployed, in some regions even more than 30%. We have 1 out of 4 European children growing up in poverty in Europe, the richest continent on earth. We have so many people who are struggling to make ends meet. We have working poor, which is a new phenomenon. And we see that the people doing very well are doing better every day. And the people in the middle and the people who are doing not so well are doing worse. The result of the crises is that the difference between rich and poor in almost all member states has increased. That's what we need to fix. If we don't fix that, and if Europe is not part of the solution, everyone will turn to the nationalists who say, let's be done with Europe and let's do it on our own. So it really is an urgent problem, and it starts with fairer relationships. It starts with fairer taxation. This society is unjust, and we need to fix it.
And as a European politician, I really ask that we are doing in the campaign, we are not asking and establishing expectations we cannot deliver, because Europe has no right to talk about pension, about the question where we're doing healthcare system or other living conditions. We have no right to intervene in the salaries on national level. That is national responsibilities, and even taxation is not a European issue. I want to wish to have more responsibility in Europe of this, but today it's national competence, and that's why we have to respect also the national colleagues. What I would want to argue for is how can we create growth, because the best social program in Europe is jobs and jobs and jobs, and that's why we have to invest in modernization of our technology.
I'm really sorry.
And in trade issues. That is the most important thing.
I really disagree. I really disagree with Manfred, because look, wherever I go, these are the issues people raise with me. I worry about the job of my children. What about the unemployment? What about the cost of living? My kids can't afford to live in their own city. What is Europe going to do about this? And then I will not say to these people, that's not our problem, you should go to the national governments. I think Europe has the tools to be part of the solution. We can't fix everything, but we should have the ambition, if people raise these issues with us, to say to them, we will do whatever we can to be part of the solution. And in housing, we can do something. We can come up with a European programme in the multi-annual financial budget where we say, if a city, for instance, 30% of what they built is for socially affordable housing, you will get support from Europe. We can do that. It's a decision we can take here in the Parliament with governments. So I think there is something Europe can do more than we're doing today.
But not on the taxation side and not on the question of salaries, because that is what I was referring to. I fully support that in other fields of investment. Europe has a lot of money in the pocket. We can do more. We can spend it in a more social, in a more justice way, no doubt about this. But Europe has to see also what are the different responsibilities. When we are creating expectations we cannot deliver, then we create finally disappointments among the people of Europe. And that's why there are different fields of responsibility. And I want to talk about the European responsibility. That is, for example, trade again. We can only create jobs in the future if we, as a trading continent, as a continent who needs export of our good products, will invest in trade. And I must tell you that the Social Democrats in the European Parliament voted against the idea to start now a discussion with our American friends for lowering the tariffs in Europe.
And we will
that is what the socialists did here in this European Parliament. And that's why there is a clear difference between left and centre-right Christian democratic political approach.
To say taxation is a national matter is unacceptable. Why? Because nations have not been able to tax big multinational corporations. They are operating and making billions of profits in Europe tax-free, not paying taxes. Only Europe can take care of that. And we should have the ambition to tax the big corporations. That's of extreme importance and fairness in Europe.
OK, we'll have to leave that section there and move on to very much a linked issue, though, foreign policy. Manfred, you were talking about trade with the United States. Just to get us going in our foreign policy section, we've got a question from a Dutch first-time voter that I'd just like to play for you. His name is Koen Meijer. He's 20 years old. This is his question.
I'm very interested in what will a cooperation in Europe look like, because we have some new and contemporary security challenges. How will NATO and EU cooperation in that sense work in the future?
OK, so a question there very much about security. We've got questions about trade as well. There's a bit of a burgeoning EU-US trade dispute at the moment, of course. Frans Timmermans, if I come to you first. In June 2018, you said the rules-based international system so carefully built up after the Second World War is now collapsing before our eyes, and the EU needs to take its destiny more into its own hands. Are you saying that Europe doesn't need the United States?
I think we do, but the only way we can keep the Americans on board is to take a bigger responsibility for our own security. So it sounds paradoxical, but the only way we can strengthen the link with the United States is to show that we're able to take a bigger responsibility for our own security.
In what sense? Talking about an EU army, for example?
I think we needed a European industrial policy for armaments. I think we need to specialize our armed forces and have discussions between member states about that. I think we need to have quicker decision-making on the sending of troops if they are necessary. So there's a lot of stuff we need to do, and we need to do it urgently. At the same time, there's a new phenomenon we have to deal with, and that's that an American president believes that it's in his interest to have a weak and divided Europe. This is something completely new, a new reality for us, and we need to react to that.
Well, isn't this somewhere where the EU should perhaps be careful, however? Donald Trump has, of course, spoken out about NATO. Poland, for example, the Baltic states in the EU, very keen on keeping a strong NATO presence in Europe, and much of NATO's strength does come from America and its huge military.
Well, again, the only way we can keep NATO in Europe is by showing to the Americans that we do our part. If we don't, I think someone like Trump would be even willing to disengage, and that would be very dangerous for Europe indeed. But also people in Poland understand that now Europe needs to do more, and they need to do more in Europe as well.
Manfred Weber, lots of talk about Europe taking its own path on the military, on the security level.
Absolutely. There is a clear demand on this. When you have in mind the previous development of the European Union with the creation of the euro, with the Schengen development, with the single market development, the next 10 years is about strengthening our foreign policy, going away from unanimous vote decision-making process to the majority-making decision process. And the second pillar is the defense pillar. And that has a lot to do with our DNA, because having in mind that the founding fathers of today's Europe had in mind, Adenauer, for example, had in mind to create, first of all, the European army, to guarantee that there is never again the chance to have war among European countries, with creating more cooperation. It's such a fascinating idea. It's still such a fascinating idea. That's why we should really insist in this. And the second element is for sure the efficiency. And I think we should be now very concrete. I look for a cyber defense unit. So in modern forms of defense, in the cyber field, in the modern field of defense of our European internet infrastructure, we have to work together, combine our forces, and we would be more efficient. We would to guarantee our citizens that we can do it together much more better than alone. That is what we should start now.
Well, just sticking with the US, you brought up yourself EU-US trade. I know that you said recently Trump's protectionist policies are a huge opportunity for Europe. Can you explain how? Because Airbus perhaps particularly worried at this moment.
I understand that this is a surprise when I speak about opportunities, but the rest of the world is looking for partners. Huh? America is not only threatening and is not only aggressive against us as Europeans. They have a trade war with China. They have also conflicts with other countries on global level. And the rest of the world is looking for alternatives to the American market. And Europe is a strong market. That's why let's use these chances to create a stronger trade relationship. My party is ready to do so. And when Trump is ready to build up walls in trade issues, then as an EPP leader, I want to create bridges, because that is the future.
Well, it's very simple. If we are united as Europeans, we're stronger than the Americans. If we are divided as Europeans, we're weaker than the Americans. It's as simple as that. And that's why Trump is trying to divide us, because he wants to negotiate with individual member states so that he can get his way on every single issue. But the relationship with America should not be reduced to such a transactional relationship. We have values we share. We have a vision of citizens, I think, of position of people in society that we share. It's under strain because of Trump, but in the long run, I believe Europe and the United States have so much in common that we need to cherish that as well.
Well, the other major foreign policy dossier that we talk about so much, EU-Russia relations. Frans Timmermans, you said just this month, I believe, if we can help Russia to transform its economy, then that could be an important step in changing relations. Do you mean making Europe less dependent on Russian gas, for example? Because, of course, many countries really are dependent on that.
They are, and they will remain so, but not to the extent that Russia can arm twist them. So we need to make sure that we create an energy union in Europe that shows solidarity whenever one member state gets into political conflict with Russia, so that they can't force them to do anything they don't want to do, so that we can share our energy resources. We need to diversify. We need to make sure that we become less and less dependent on fossil fuels. So in the long run, for Russia, depending only on fossil fuels is very dangerous for that country. And if it's dangerous for Russia, it's dangerous for us as well. So we have a vested interest in trying to help Russia to transform its economy, diversify its economy. But until today, we see no signals of that, sadly.
OK, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to give Manfred Weber time to reply to that because we are running out of time in our programme. I'd like to give you both up to 30 seconds each to give a final statement about why Europeans should give their support to your parties. Manfred Weber, over to you.
When I speak about Europe, I start with optimism, because I'm 46 years old. I'm the first generation of this continent who can live all over Europe in peace and freedom. We established a good Europe, and I want to defend this Europe against the nationalists, against those who practice again egoism and want to go back. And for doing so, we need a reformed Europe, a new chapter, a new generation who is taking over the lead, which means in practical to listen to people, start with a listen to concerns of people, and practice a democratic Europe.
Elie Wiesel once said that the opposite of love isn't hate, but indifference. So the only thing I'm asking of people is never to be indifferent. Whatever you do, go to the European election, choose for Europe, choose against Europe. That's your right, but never be indifferent. The nationalists can never win the argument anywhere in Europe unless the majority of the people remain indifferent. So never be indifferent.
A pro-European message there from Frans Timmermans to round off our programme. Thank you very much. Thanks as well to Manfred Weber. I'd like to thank both of our guests and our viewers, of course. Do remember, European elections are between May 23rd and 26th. We've got plenty of special coverage here on France 24 between now and then. We'll be putting first-time voters to MEP candidates. We're going to have daily updates on the campaigns in the 2 weeks before the election as well. So do tune in for that. For now, though, goodbye from us and back to Paris to continue our live coverage of international news.